This is something that fascinates me. It's our relationship to the musical score because that's our work, our job. And we have composers who write down, I would say, kind of like a blueprint of what they would like us to do, but they can't write everything. So there's some things that are written between the lines, or you have to look deeper to discover, you know, the actual meaning. And sometimes there are issues that have no solution really. And, I would concentrate on Beethoven because that's kind of what I've been doing for the last few years. And so there's the whole issue these days of what we call the urtext, which is the super clean, as close as possible to the composer's intention. And, something like this is something that I love. It's the new Barenreiter edition. It's very beautiful. It's edited by a man named Jonathan Delmar, and it looks gorgeous. This is 109, and it just looks so clean and beautiful. And then it also has some comments in the back, which are extremely important, little variants or some discrepancies between this first edition and a manuscript and so on. So it's like a research document in a way, right? So a lot of people feel that if you play what's on that page, the urtext, then basically you've done your job. Just follow the instruction. If it says forte, play forte, etc. And of course, that is what we should all do, follow the score. So my title is, can we change the score? And, the basic answer is no, you shouldn't, because the score is a legacy from the composer to us. However, there are some things that are ambiguous, and sometimes there are discrepancies. There between Beethoven and the publisher, there were always a lot of letters, because he would send his manuscript and then they would print a demo copy and send it back to him. Then he would make some corrections, send it back to them. And there was, so there was a lot of back and forth. Sometimes he changed his mind and said, no, I prefer this to be different. So it's never really 100% clear picture. And, just talking about 119, I want to show you, I happen to have here a copy of the manuscript of 109. And it's an amazing document. Let's see. These you can find in libraries these days. But I'm fascinated. I'll tell you a little story about the manuscript. This is the cover for 109, Sonata, etc. And if you notice at the bottom, there's like some burned stuff because he probably dropped a match from a candle or something like that. So it's, you get this kind of physical feeling of Beethoven in the creative process, and so it's really fantastic. And this is the first page of 109 in manuscript, okay? And that's what it looks like. And it's not quite as clean as our little urtext page, but you can read it well. I usually can read very well from the manuscript, but it takes some getting used to. And over here, he ran out of space, so he had to extend the line, to write some extra notes and so on. And then in addition to manuscripts, there's something called sketches, which he did prodigiously. He would be walking in the Vienna woods or outside in the countryside, and he always had a notebook with him, and he would jot down ideas. Over here would be like the theme of the violin concerto, and over there he would be like the Sixth Symphony, maybe some wind thing. So these are now also available. They're fascinating because you can see that he was trying out some idea and he would change his mind and maybe like turn it around or alter it somehow. So you kind of see his brain working, So all of that is really, to me, it's kind of inspiring. And the little story I'm going to tell you is the first time I went to his birthhouse in Bonn, in Germany, the Beethoven House. It's a museum, but it's also an archive and a library. So I had written to them, I said, I'm coming, I'd like to look at your collection and so on. And so they let me go to the library, which is on the third floor. I was there from 8 a.m. when they opened until 4:30. They close at 5. And I was looking at various books and manuscript copies and so on. And the director came by and he said, you look like somebody who's quite serious about Beethoven. So would you like to see an original manuscript? And you need approval for that. You have to write you have to be a musicologist or a researcher or a publisher or something. And I said, yeah, of course. So he took me downstairs to a vault. And he asked me, well, what would you like to see? And I said, well, I'm learning 111, so could I see the manuscript of 111? And he pulled out these big drawers, which are kind of like steel metal. And he took out the manuscript of Sonata Opus 111, and he put it on a table. I get choked up when I talk about this. And he said, okay, you have half an hour. So I had half an hour with Beethoven's handwriting in front of me. He said, use your credit card to turn the pages so you don't get finger. He didn't have gloves or anything. So I'm turning the pages of 111 and I see the ink and the pencil and the little corrections. And occasionally there was like a coffee stain or something. And, it just kind of changed my life in a way because you're in touch with the creative genius right there. And, I'm very grateful I've been to Beethoven House a number of times since then, but that was the first one was such a revelation. So back to the score. I'm going to talk about some problems and some decision making that you have to do. And my first point is about the very first note of the very first sonata. It's the F minor sonata, Opus 2, number 1. Okay, so that's a nice one. It's the first published one. And there's a dilemma that everybody calls the missing dot. Because the very first note of the very first published sonata, the C, does not have a staccato on it. All the other notes have staccato, so it's like, and then when it comes in the left hand, that one has a staccato on it. So everybody's like struggling with this, he didn't write a dot, so does that mean I have to play it longer, like a long upbeat, like, or maybe I should slur it, like, and some very reputable pianists play a slur there, or they play a long note. So you have to decide what it means. And I think what it means is that he assumed that we know that that's an upbeat and it's going to be a short note anyway. That's my thinking. It's not in the score, and some people disagree with me, but I think you have to play it short, even though it doesn't have a dot. This is a fantastic book by Czerny. It's called On the Proper Performance of All of Beethoven's Piano Works. It's available, it's a little bit expensive. Most libraries have it. And he wrote a little comment and a metronome marking for each movement of each sonata, also violin sonata, cello, etc., etc. And he wrote this about 15 years after Beethoven died. And he wrote a dot on the first note on the C. He knows what Beethoven wanted. We don't know for sure. But I think it's just an upbeat, right? So you have to decide what to do. There's nobody can tell you. I call them dilemmas because there's no final answer. You have to decide. But what I like about it is that you are creatively engaged with the score. You're asking questions. You're saying, what does this mean? And it's different here. Did they actually, and sometimes it's clearly purposeful. The difference is like there's a variation, or like Mr. Levin says, the ornamentation. But sometimes it's just missing information, so you have to decide. So I want to tell you a little joke before we stop. This, I think, is supposed to be a conversation between the great master Anton Rubinstein from the Moscow Conservatory, and his prodigious pupil Joseph Hoffman, who was like 14 years old, playing everything and so on. And the story goes that Rubinstein, this is Anton, not Arthur. Anton says, you know, young man, the score is sacred. You should never, ever change anything. You know, if it says forte, you play forte. If it says ritenno, just, you know, this is like, for us, it's like religion, you know. And little Joseph Hoffman is 14, but he's really a prodigy and he's really smart. He says, but maestro, you know, when you play, you change things all the time. You know, sometimes you, instead of forte, you play piano, or, you know, and it always sounds beautiful, but how can you say, you know, that you can't change anything? And Rubinstein leans down to me and says, when you know as much as I do, you can change things. They say you have to learn the rules before you can break the rules. So I'm not saying that you can just do whatever you want, but there are things that take some decision making in the interpretation, and it makes us kind of have an exchange between us and the composer, which I find very exciting.